Before we move on to our next session, I just want to give a quick shout out to Glassdoor, the company that is helping so many people find jobs they love and employers find employees that they love. It's going to be a big year for the company, we're sure. And now I'd like to invite up their CEO, Robert Hohman, on the stage to join me.
Well, good morning, everybody. How are you? It's great to be here. Thank you all for coming out. We are celebrating the 10th year of Best Places to Work at Glassdoor. Yeah, that's a good start. I started Glassdoor 10 years ago because I wanted to help people find a job and company that they love. We pretty rapidly discovered that if we help people find a job and company they love, those same people would be amazing for companies. And so what we were really doing was helping the right people end up in the right jobs, which was good for them and it was good for companies. Flash forward 10 years, and one of my favorite things is celebrating the best companies and trying to distill from them what it is they do that truly inspires their workforce and draws the best people to them, how they think about recruiting, and that's really what today is all about. And so, again, thank you all for being here, and to everyone on the live stream, it's great to have you with us. Today we have a really special treat. So Patty McCord was Chief Talent Officer for Netflix for 14 years. She is co-author of the famous Netflix deck. How many of you have seen or read the Netflix deck? I think it's required reading in our space. And now she's written a great book called Powerful, Building a Culture of Freedom and Responsibility. Patty has been a mentor for me. She has been an inspiration for me. Truly, she has made me a better leader. I don't want to get all gushy before she comes out here, but she is one of the exceptional HR leaders, I think, in our space in the last several decades that really helps us connect and uncover the human dignity in people and how we get the best out of them or, allow them to do their best at work, which I think is a really transformational idea and to think about the way that people and companies interact together. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Patty McCord.
Is that a cute picture or what?
Have a seat.
Couch?
Okay, so I thought I would start with some reminiscing.
Yeah.
I think it was 3 years ago, around this time, that you were scheduled to appear at a Glassdoor event.
Yes.
And the nightmare of all nightmares happens I think it was the day before the event. I get a call from Patty, and she's like, actually, it's more like, I just got back from the doctor and I'm a little jacked up on medicines. I broke my ankle. I can't be there. And this is the worst nightmare for anyone in this space, right? You're like, wait, Patty McCord is going to cancel our event the day before?
He wasn't very understanding.
The day before.
No, this is Robert. He's like, okay, how many drugs are you on? I'm like, a lot. I'm bedridden. He goes, no, you can do it. We'll just put you on stage. We'll put a little blanket with Ames chair. And I'm like,
I think I offered a helicopter, a plane.
Yes.
I was going to drive down there myself to get you.
An Ambo limo.
I was like, that's right. We actually got you an ambulance limo.
Yeah.
That exists.
Yes. If you look on Yelp. So I said, you don't understand, I'm on narcotics. He's like, I've seen you in a couple of martinis. You'll be fine.
Awesome. Even better.
We'll be good. So I had a couple of martinis before this. I'm teasing.
So we're lit up. So how's the ankle?
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I'm not jumping out of airplanes or anything.
All right. God damn it. Okay, so.
Are you prepared now?
I don't know.
Okay.
Somewhere in here are questions to ask you. In case, I'm a software engineer. That's my normal job.
He's such a geek. It's my favorite thing about you.
It is true. I want to know about, you've told me this story, but I think everyone would really like to hear this story about when you kind of had this aha moment, if there was one, where you went in and you talked to Reed, who was the CEO of Netflix, and this whole idea of basically, we don't need to empower our people, we need to stop taking their power away. How did that happen?
It took a long time. It took years and years. I mean, I was a real HR person. I have my credentials. I'm one of you people. But I'm a recruiter first, so that kind of colored who I am. So, those of us, we recruiters, right, we don't mind if somebody leaves. It's great. Another opportunity to hire somebody. Retention's not our favorite word. So we went through... I had so I'll tell you this way. I had 3 startups at Netflix. I tend to be kind of a serial entrepreneur. My first startup at Netflix was, could we come up with a business model that might actually make some money before we ran out? Second, the startup was DVD by mail. The third was the technology around video streaming. But it was at the end of our first startup, like 4 years in, where we ran out of money and I laid off a third of the company. And it wasn't a very big company, but still, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I mean, that's a lot, right? And I said goodbye to anyone who wasn't technically very competent. I said goodbye to anybody who was not working directly on the DVD by mail service. And I said goodbye to all the babies and whiners. Because we just didn't have time. Oh, I also said goodbye to everybody in middle management because I only needed people that were actually working on the product, right? So if it was your job to give somebody permission, I just figured we might as well have them have permission. And so I laid myself off. This was in October of 2001, and if we could make payroll by January, I was going to stay. That was the deal.
I've never heard this story.
You haven't
Wow.
heard this story?
No.
So that Christmas, all of you got a DVD player because they dropped to $99 for the first time, and literally everyone in America had one under their Christmas tree, and the only marketing we could do was this piece of paper in every box that said, try Netflix for free. So come January, our business literally, the charts were like this, like complete hockey stick. So we're doing twice as much work with a third as many people, and it was more fun. And then we went public. And when the auditors came and the bankers came and the SOX people came to tell us about all the rules that it was time for us to put in because we were a public company, at that point we had really, Reed and I drove to work one day and he's like, this is so much fun. I'm like, I never worked this hard in my life and I've never been this excited about coming to work. He's like, what is it? And that's when we wrote the chapter on high performance. It was the right people in the right place, really concentrating on just, a handful of things to get done. And we didn't have to tell people what to do. They could figure it out for themselves. So that's when it changed, So 2 things happened for me. One of them was I started thinking about the why of everything that I did. And I did it all the way everybody else did, best practices, what everybody else does. And then I started thinking about, why don't I just ask people to be responsible and see whether or not they pull it off? I mean, it was the bold experiment. I literally would stand up in front of people and say, okay, the lawyers tell us that if we don't keep track of paid time off, that you guys are going to be in complete chaos and you're not going to get any work done. And it's going to be a disaster and we're going to get sued. So if all that shit happens, then we'll go back to the way everybody else does stuff. But I don't think it will, so let's give it a try.
The whys are my favorite part, and this is where you've inspired me. I remember someone put an employee handbook on my desk. We became a real company 5 years ago,
I
we're
remember
like, okay,
this.
we got to have an employee handbook, and I was reading this employee handbook going, oh my God, this is a mess. And one of them in there was the company will pay for 1.5 to 2 glasses of wine with dinner and no more. And I was just like, why?
You know what I think we should do in the Bay Area?
If you have to specify.
I think we should like Margaret Mead discover the origins of the original employee handbook, right? Because it's all the same one. We just keep changing the logos.
It's true.
Right?
It is true. And
but that was somebody who decided that wine would be okay in moderation.
Yep. And this why of basically why, because I went to my lawyer and I'm like, why do we have to have this? And there wasn't a good answer, and you just keep going why and why and why. And there's a shocking number of times there's not a good reason. It's because everybody else does it.
Yeah, here's another.
Or we fear our employees.
Here's another trick. Ask to see the law.
Yeah, right.
Say, show me the statute. I mean, it's in lawyer language, which is hard to read, but it's English. And you can kind of parse through it and go, I don't think this means that's illegal. Well, it doesn't mean it's illegal. It means they might sue us. Right? And so, somebody might sue you for it. Here's the deal about people suing you if you're worried about this. Why do people sue companies? Because they're pissed. Don't piss them off. Shocking, isn't it?
This is the raw
Took me
honesty.
years to come to that conclusion.
I believe the phrase is it's simple but not easy.
Yeah, and it's about, like, it's interesting. One of the, I didn't think was controversial parts of my book is the part around radical honesty.
Yeah, actually, let's talk about that.
And people think it means be mean, right? It's like, you know how feedback has come to equal constructive criticism, which equals telling somebody a bad thing in a nice way? It's completely stupid, right? If you think about feedback, okay, if you believe that feedback results in better performance, which I think most of us do, the only feedback you'd give would be good feedback. In the moment. That's it, you just did it. You so rock. You will go do that again 4 times today. If I say, Robert, that issue that you've had cross-functionally is rearing its ugly head again. And you need to work harder in, making sure that cross-functional communication is in a more positive and empowering vein. You have no clue what I just said.
It's hard to make that face exactly the way you do.
You have no clue what I just said, and it's not helpful feedback at all, because I haven't said, hey, like this, wait a minute, you're doing it right now. When you do this, it results in this. Here's a different way you could.
Okay, but it is
operate.
hard. It's hard. And you're right. Like, I think what you're saying is you need to make sure you give positive feedback to people in the moment, and I get that. That makes sense.
Yep.
But there's a lot of times that hard conversations need to be had too.
Yeah.
And like you are really, what I've observed is that you are very, very good at just matter of fact, plain as day, no, it's just this is the situation. It's not personal. I feel like, though, that's not easy, and it's a bit of an art. And I'm not sure how one gets better at it, to be honest with you.
Practice. I'm really good at it. I've done this my whole life. So a couple things, like when I go crazy about the annual performance review, which I think is an utter total waste of time, I say, let's say that is your feedback mechanism. Name one other thing you do once a year that you're good at. That'd be nothing, right? So you practice it, and you practice it with the little things, right? And what makes people crazy is that when you spin it. That thing I just said to you, right? It's like, I don't like something you did, but I haven't given you a scintilla of information on how to make it better, right? So the next time you have bad communication interdepartmentally, which you will, you'll feel bad. But you don't even know why. And so it's partly people like you, my friend, it's the geeks that taught me this. Okay, so let me explain people like Robert to you. The world is
good.
The world is good or bad. It's right or wrong. It's black or white. It's 0 or 1. And any nuance.
That's our happy place, anyway.
That's your happy place, right? And all the nuance in the gray areas, that's bullshit, right? So when I'm telling you something in HR speak, and, practice this when you go home with your friends, because all of you have geeks at work. When they roll their eyes because you're speaking the language that literally no one else on the planet speaks, they're not the crazy ones. When they're rolling their eyes, you just said something that probably sounds stupid, just saying.
Yeah, you've talked about this before, that you knew you were being authentic and transparent when the engineers didn't roll their eyes. And in fact, when the engineers are technical people who do tend to be very plain speaking, they speak in equations, we speak in code, it's fact, there's no spin in code.
Your happy place.
And so it is our happy place.
I know.
But it is a fascinating metaphor too for when you don't get that eye roll from those types of people, you probably are speaking transparently and authentically.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example that's in the book. We realized that at our rate of growth at Netflix that we were going to represent a third of the U.S. internet bandwidth. Happened in a meeting one day. And we were just stunned. It's like, oh my God. That's a lot of bits. So the head of engineering, Neil Hunt, and I, the meeting gets adjourned. I'm like, can you stay for a minute? Like, what are we going to do about this? I mean, at that point, we had a data center that we shipped the DVDs from, right? And I'm like, who manages that kind of data on the internet? And we're like whiteboarding. I'm like, oh, is it Yahoo? Is it eBay? Is it Google? Is it, yeah, who, right? It's huge, right? And I said, can we do that in our data center? He's like, oh, hell no. Like, this is a cloud-based solution that we have to do, right? So we go sit down with our IT guys, who are brilliant, wonderful, fabulous, amazing people. And we say, hey, by the way, here's the situation. They're like, no worries. Go exec something, we'll build a cloud. Done. And I looked at them and I'm like, you know what? You guys could probably do this, but not by next year. Right? It has to be somebody that's seen scale. It has to be a team that's been moving 100 times the amount of data that we're doing at minimum. Right? And one of the guys says, I've been here 7 years. I'm an amazing engineer. What the hell are you saying? And I'm like, I don't know if this is the place for you in that new team. But, we wouldn't be here today with this problem if it wasn't for you. How crazy is that? And so they didn't like break down and weep. They didn't punch me in the face, although they might have wanted to. But, they're like, well, what are we going to do about that? And I'm like, I don't know, but we got a year to figure it out. So I didn't say horrible things to them. I just spoke the truth about the future that turned out to be, it just is, right? And they can handle it. And so then we started planning about what to do about that in their careers, and I think we can have these conversations.
So there's a couple things in there which I think are super interesting. One is this concept of tours of duty. That, like, for some people who had made Netflix what it was no longer going to be the place for them, and that was okay.
Yeah. Speaking as one of them.
Speaking as
former
Fair
Netflix
enough.
employee,
Fair
right?
enough.
Do you love that article that somebody wrote? She created the culture that got her fired. I'm like, wow, there's a clickbait headline. Speaking of tours of duty, so let's play
I was going to
for a
ask you
second.
that, and I was going to ask you, you have a bigger view of talent.
Yeah.
Like, frequently, talent is viewed as basically, let's get the people in the door, give them to the hiring manager, we're done.
Yeah.
And then maybe you sprinkle in L&D a little bit, but like that's it.
Yep.
And you've pitched a bigger, more holistic view, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, let's do a couple things. Raise your hand if you're in the job that you got when you graduated from college, or if you're an intern, don't. Okay, so 2 people were retained. The rest of you worked for really sucky companies, right? Okay, so tours of duty is the truth, has been the truth for probably 5 decades. So what say every 50 years we shake it up? Call me crazy, right? And I do think about it that way. I think about it as the problems that you're trying to solve in the future and the teams that you're putting together to solve them. And here's another thing for those of you who how you hire somebody to do a job and then they do it, then they're done. Might be 5 years, it might be 5 months, right? If it's 5 months, it's probably a contracting job. But if it's 5 years, then you've spent 5 years building something and you built it and it's done and you don't need another thing built, then the right thing to do is not put that person in charge of maintaining it. Not who they are, right? So back to the specific point you made, it is everybody's job to look for talent for a company. Every single person, right? Soccer games in the Bay Area, oh, so rich. Okay, so I'll give you my recruiting story. Back in the day, when I was a technical recruiter, and I was a really good one, and you'll relate to this, I was hiring software engineers, very specific, very technical software engineers. So I'd ask my guys, like, which was, if you guys were in the South Bay, you'd see this more, but which was the ethnic restaurant du jour in some strip mall in Cupertino? Right, it's Afghan food or something like that, because they've always got some place that nobody else knows.
So shockingly accurate.
Isn't it shockingly accurate? Okay, and so then I would go
Korean
into
in
the little,
1993.
yeah, exactly, right, the little Thai place that doesn't even have a sign that's next to the nail salon. And on the counter, they'd have the fishbowl where you put your business cards in to get a free lunch. And I'd just take the fishbowl and I'd go to I did to the table in the corner, and the waitress would come up and go, "Oh, this isn't okay." I'm like, "Bring me pad thai, it's all good." And I would just dump it out. And this is before we had phones with cameras in them, right? And I would take out my little notebook and I'd just write down everybody's name. I'd go back to work and call them. and but the reason I'm telling you that story is that it's not what you know or who you know, it's who knows what you know. It's all the talent that you know all of the time. Always be recruiting. Always, always, always. And so, if I had been smarter now, I probably would have face scanned people in the restaurant. But it's, knowing where your talent lives and who they are and what motivates them. And I'm shocked at how many HR people I know that have never sat next to someone writing code.
Interesting.
Right? Have you sat in a marketing meeting and talked for 3 hours about an antecedent in a sentence, right? So, I mean, the part of where I think we are an integral part of our business is not only do we, understand the business, right? We deeply understand what's the competition, what's our P&L, where's our revenue come from, all of that stuff, all the numeral stuff, but that we actually spend time with people doing the work. Because we're wired different. We all know this. I have fraternal twin daughters. People don't even know they're sisters. They are such different humans. So, just because somebody's resume has all the buzzwords does not mean that's the right match to solve your problem.
Yeah. And, to your point, too, I have met so many CEOs now who know precisely what the strategy is that they need to execute. They know exactly what they need to do. They literally don't have the people or talent to do it.
Yeah.
And this function has become so strategic in the last decade or 2 decades. I mean, you felt it acutely. Netflix was probably early in that wave,
Yep.
but the rest of the companies are largely at this now, where it's you either get this talent and you execute on your strategy and you succeed, or you get beat. Not because you didn't know what the right thing to do was as a company, but because you couldn't get the people to do it.
Yeah. It's funny. When I first left Netflix, I spent the next couple of years with startup CEOs, probably when we were hanging out together a lot. Yeah. And and your Glassdoor was kind of in my sweet spot at the time. It's like, whoa, we're real. This is real. This is going to last. How do we make a company that's solid enough to to exist over decades, not over the next 10 months. And now it's huge corporations. I mean, it's banks that are calling me. They're like, we're afraid of fintech. And how do we attract, great people to come do this? I'm like, how many people do I have to ask permission to get something done? Well, we're a tops down, people aren't going to come work for you. And you can't move as fast, right? And so it's fascinating. I'm not very helpful to them. In fact, if you're working for a large corporation that's thinking of bringing me in to fix it, I can't. I don't know how.
But what do they do? I mean, for people
you try
that are...
something. You manage locally, and not everything has to be a global corporate initiative. Okay, so give that up. Right? And consistency as something that we as a function, we're doing that because we want to be consistent. I'm like, seriously, that's our goal? That's the best we can do? The same? Hey, our policy is consistent globally. It's like, so what? No, it's not. They're just cheating in another country. Right, so recognize what you do, and then so then take a little organization and sequester them off and let them come up with a better way of doing things. I don't know why we got to think of all this. I've learned so much since I've been gone from professional sports coaches. These guys, okay.
Wait, what?
Well, I've said this in a couple talks, but I'll do it again for you because it's fun. So I go to Montreal in February. Who's been to Montreal in February? It's so cold. My daughter, I'm like, hey, honey, I'm going to Montreal in February. She's like, Patagonia, puffy coat to your feet. Buy it now. So I go to Montreal. I then realize it's colder than anything in Montreal. So I go to where I'm going to talk, and I find my hotel so I can go underground so I don't have to go out in the blizzard. So I go underground. I'm at the Bell Center. Do anybody know what happens in the Bell Center in Montreal, Canada? It's Stanley Cup. Okay. Last moment, I'm going to be on stage with Scotty Bowman. Scotty Bowman is the winningest hockey coach in the history of hockey. I don't know. I don't know from hockey. I'm underground, right? And I'm talking to Scott Bowman, and he says to me, "We're under the ice." And I'm like, I'm in a hockey stadium. Like, I'm not going to go out on this stage. I'm going to go out on how many people fit in a hockey stadium. So, and he's just lovely, right? He's a 70-year-old man. So I go up onto the stage, and my face is on the Jumbotron, right? Like, and there's thousands of people in the audience. So they introduce me, and I do Botox face. You know, how when somebody in an interview tells you that weird shit they shouldn't be telling you, and you go, "Oh, that's fascinating. Tell me more." Okay, so I sit on my couch like this, and I'm waiting, and so Scott Bowman comes out, and the crowd goes bananas. I mean, like, people are taking selfies, they're clapping like this, right? Because here he is, this hockey god, right? And, if they had the big fingers, they would have been foam fingering, right? I mean, they're like stomping on the ground because Scott Bowman's there. So now I'm nothing, right? So the moderator says to him, "Mr. Bowman, you've coached all the greats. You've won so many games. How is it that you do that?" He said, "We play an 80-game season. Every 10 games, I sit down with each of my players. They do a self-evaluation. I do an evaluation. I run all their statistics. We talk about what other teams we're going to play in the next 10 games, what their strengths and weaknesses are, what the strengths and weaknesses are on the other team, about what they've done in the last 10 games and what they need to do to make it a great team in the next 10 games. A moderator says to me, "Patty McCord, you hate the annual performance review. I've never heard you say what you would do differently." I'm like, "What he said?" I mean, seriously, is that a great idea? Like, duh. Like what if, here's an idea. What if we had this thing that was like a performance improvement plan? Like, we put a plan for you to improve your performance? Wouldn't that be, oh yeah, I can't do that. Because we've now made it synonymous with,
You're about to be fired.
I'm going to prove that I have to fire you. Bummer.
Right.
That would have been a good tool.
They're-
Too bad we screwed that one up.
They're career development plans now.
They're pre-development?
They're CDPs, career development plans.
Oh, CDPs. I'm glad we have an acronym because that's really important.
Okay. All right, so
CDP.
changing topics a tiny
Yes.
bit. I mean, we could talk a long time about CDPs.
We could talk
but
a lot, yeah.
I really want to know, Me Too, time is up, you've been on the book tour, you've been talking, you've been in, I think, multiple countries too. You've seen different cultures and how they're dealing with this. A lot of companies are going to be tempted to put a bunch of new rules in place to try and deal with this. Thoughts? I mean, I know what your core thought is, but how would you deal with it?
I'm really worried, and you guys have to, each one of you has to do something about this, that we don't become the HR moms that people tell on. He looked at my boobs instead of my eyeballs, right? What are you going to do about it in HR? Right? What you're going to do is you're going to say, "Hey, next time that happens, you want to go, that makes me really uncomfortable. Please stop doing that." And that person will. Right? We're not going to, we're in real danger of becoming an HR problem. This is not an HR problem. This is a problem for all of us who work. And so I just got a call the other day, should people trust HR? Right? Would you recommend to somebody that they go to HR if they feel like they've been sexually harassed? I'm like, oh man, that hurts my heart to hear that question. But you shouldn't have to just go to HR. You should go to anybody and say, and so, our number one job is to make sure we are walking the talk. Right? We can do unconscious bias until hell freezes over if our management team isn't walking the talk. I mean it. Right? And we have to stand up for each other. We have to call these behaviors when they happen, like, I love you to pieces, but you're mansplaining. Okay, so like you're telling me something I already know. I mean, I can't tell you how many times when I was at Netflix, somebody would say, I heard what happened at the management team. I'm like, I'm on the management team. Yeah, I heard that Reed said. I'm like, I was there. I was in the meeting. Yeah, so like I'm like, I was there. Okay, here's another one. I get all these calls. This was the week that 7 men got fired for sexual harassment and 7 women took their place. Right? What did I think about that? And I said, yeah, let's take Matt Lauer, right? Yeah, here in the Silicon Valley, well, we'd have women in management, we'd have women on their boards. It's a pipeline issue. There just aren't enough qualified women to do the job. I'm like, well, what do we do when Matt Lauer leaves? Oh, well, she's sitting right there. How about the person at the table already, right? So the talent is in front of us, okay? We are at the, you got me started.
I got you started. Go.
3 most female-dominated teams in any company: sales and marketing, finance, and HR. We own pay.
That is a good point.
What say we write some checks? Call me crazy, right? And I'm serious. So when I ran diversity at Sun in the 90s, man, we celebrated up one side and down the other, and we didn't fix pay. We didn't do anything about it, and we could have. And when you're paid the same as somebody else and you feel like you're being treated equally, you act more equal, okay? So, like, forget sensitivity training. Do the numbers first, and then fix that. And then if you're in recruiting, when I talk to women's groups, I'm like, our compensation systems that we as women create keep us down. You know this, right? If I join a firm and you hire me at 20% below what I'm worth in the open market, and you have a 6.5% merit increase budget with a bell curve distribution and ratings and rankings and salary ranges, and I'm amazing, and you give me twice what the average raise is, that's right, I get 13% increase. Now I only suck by 7. And it compounds, right? So we have to really, really, the training, and that's all good stuff, and unconscious bias is real, I know that. But we own the mechanics of pay, promotions, terminations. This is our job. So let's do it on behalf of equality.
Powerful. And to that end, on Glassdoor website too, we've done a bunch of research around pay equality, and there's a model which any company can download, and you can plug your data in, and you can begin to figure out whether there's bias in your pay. We use it internally now. It's a little bit of a heavy lift the first time you do it, but once you do it, after that, like we plug all of our performance review ratings in. We plug our bonuses in, we plug our raises in, and you can just see, did we introduce any bias? Did we, once you're sure you kind of got it, then it's a living, breathing, ongoing thing that you can do. And to your point, build the spreadsheet.
Yeah, use the data, and then behavior is data too. I think we've talked about this before, right? So here's how most people get promoted. I need to promote somebody. I want somebody who's smart, articulate, quick on their feet, decisive. Someone just like me. Maybe me 10 years ago, because I don't want them to be that much of a threat. Because if I hire me now, I'm in trouble. So I only want the old me, right? And so we can question that, right? We can say, well, what are the, and how might those things be expressed differently with different kinds of people without your crazy personality, for example. So yeah, the data super helps because it tells you where to look.
Gives you confidence and conviction to lean into, I found too.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, let's go to your questions. How are we doing this precisely? Is there a mic?
Yeah.
Right,
we do have 2 microphones. So we do have the hashtag GD Tour for everybody live on the stream, and then everybody here in the audience as well. Just raise your hand and we'll get a mic over and do a couple of questions for both Robert and Patty. So who would like to open up with the first question?
Come on, be brave.
Over that side. I'll actually go across here.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm super excited that you're here today, by the way. I read a lot of your articles, and I will now be reading your book, so.
Yeah, you.
So you talk about people hating to be spun. Unfortunately, I do feel like this is something that's pretty common in giving candidate feedback.
Yep.
We want to remain politically correct. We don't want to make sure that we are, expressing any doubts that are on the behavioral side. So we try to point just directly to hard skills, but that can be hard when it is more behavioral than hard skill based.
Yep.
What was your methodology around this at Netflix?
First of all, I think that great recruiting is like painting. It's all in the prep. So the first thing to do is to get together with the team that's going to be interviewing and assign very distinct roles to each interviewer. So you want somebody to interview for skills, somebody to interview for fit. I don't involve everybody on the team because if you hire a great person, they're going to love them. So everybody doesn't need to give input. I can't tell you how many interviews I've been on where somebody on the interview team is the person that we're quietly getting rid of. Like, is that smart? That's not smart. Don't do that, right? So have very crisp interview teams where everybody has a specific set of questions to ask and you go over that with the team, right? And you talk about at first you start with the problem. What problem are we trying to solve? What does the team look like now? What are the gaps that we're trying to fill, okay? We used to do recruitment meetings with hiring manager teams every Monday morning first thing and every Friday afternoon last thing. And at the end of, certainly when you're starting with a new team, at the end of every day of the interviews, it's best to get together in person and say, what'd you think of this candidate? And so not this, or I liked him. So when somebody says, oh, I really liked him, it's like, okay, what question did you ask? What answer did they give to lead you to that conclusion, right? And I want to have a beer with him because I think he's funny. Unless you're hiring for a stand-up comedian at a bar, is probably not legit, right? And here's another thing. Sometimes you take a chance on people and you hire them and they're close, but you really like them or they have a lot of passion. I'm completely okay with doing that, especially internally with promotions. Just say so. You can tell candidates this in the interview process. You know what? We love you, and you're so excited about the problem we have to solve, and we really we all really enjoyed interviewing you. Got to tell you, there's a couple of skills that we were looking for that you're missing. But we're willing to take a chance if you will, but recognize both of us are taking that chance. Because if you don't say that, then the person says legitimately, well, why'd you hire me if you didn't think I could do the job? Right? And if it turns out that you're 4 months in, you're like, oh, big mistake, right? Then you can say, I'm sorry. We took a chance. It's not going to work. Let's call it a day before we get too involved in it. So if you start with the problem you're trying to solve, not the kind of person you want to hire to do it, it frees everything up. Right? So now I'm not looking for someone just like me. I'm looking for somebody to uniquely solve this problem that no one on the team can solve now. Right? So now you might be open to, when I've done this, I've had people where I'm like, you are the weirdest person in the world, but your methodology is interesting. When we first started hiring data scientists, all my recruiters are like, these guys are so weird. I'm like, well, they're not at the club. They're data scientists. And if you can't love them, then you can't recruit them. Right? So, what do they do for fun? Not party.
Awesome.
I know what they do for fun.
I know you do.
I love your idea, though, of literally, I don't think I've ever had a recruiter come and sit with me to see, like back in the day when I was coding, to ever, see what do we actually do.
Yeah.
That's super obvious and interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I got it from when I worked at Borland, our crazy CEO, Philippe Kahn.
Yeah.
He's a weird guy, but the engineers would sit at his feet, worshiping him, and he was a jazz musician, and
Yeah.
his metaphors were always, writing code is like writing music, it's like jamming, and he would speak to them in those kind of words, and I thought, I've never seen anybody. It is like writing music. It's like, well, you put those numerals on that screen and it turns out to be this? Get out.
Awesome. And Patty, we had an interesting question come through social here. So as a recruiter, How do you know that the candidate is the right fit? Obviously, there are certain boxes they need to check off along the way, but ultimately, is there intuition or instinct at play?
Of course there is. And for those of us who do it for a living, it's pattern recognition, right? So my CFO one time said to me, you know, you're a diva. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah. But what leads you to believe that's true, Barry? And he said, well, you know, whenever you make a call that somebody's not going to work out in an interview, you've been right 100% of the time. You know, you have this gift. And I'm like, you know, I really want you to think I'm magic because I'm kind of digging this. But the truth is we have the same gift. It's called pattern recognition, and yours is with numerals. You know, mine is with people. So, for example, when the data scientists bring me this candidate that they want me to nail, like, do not interview him, Patty. Don't interview him. Just sell him. Like, he's perfect. Look at this. I'm looking at his resume. He's got, 6 pages of patents. Like, wow. What am I going to ask this guy, right? So we get done. We're at the round table at the end of the day, and I'm like, hey, you guys, did he talk to you about his boss that he has now? Oh, that guy's such an asshole. I'm like, I know, poor guy. Tell you about the one before that? He was even worse. I'm like, I know. How far did you go back? Because I went to elementary school. Do you realize that he was smarter than his principal? He's been smarter than every CEO he's ever worked for. So I say to the hiring manager, guess who the next asshole boss is? And he goes, I can handle these people, And I'm like, you probably can. But the rest of your happy team? Mm-hmm. My mama would say, misery loves company. And he said, oh, are you telling me I can't hire him? I'm like, no, I'm not telling you. That's your team. It's not mine.
Yeah.
But I'm just telling you, this is a miserable person. Just saying.
So pattern recognition, awesome. Any other questions from the audience? Let's go one of the 2 ladies here in the middle, if you don't mind. Let's start with the one with the orange. Yes, right there. There we go. Behind you.
Okay, great. I have a question for you on rating scales with performance reviews. I hate them. What's a good way to push back and tell my executive team that people don't want to be labeled?
Oh, God, especially if you have a company full of engineers. Can I rate them a 4.72?
Exactly.
I wanted to have 3. Good, bad,
We only
ugly.
had 1 decimal point.
Good, bad, and ugly.
decimal
Like,
points, there was
we
only
love
1
you, we
decimal
hate
point.
you, you suck. Okay? I mean, that's kind of it. Rating scales help people who are mathematically minded, give them a sense of shared comparative performance. I'm not a huge fan. I'm not a huge fan. I think the sort of lifeboat exercise is more valuable. Here's the test that we used at Netflix. If this person said they were leaving, would you beg them to stay? Right? Which is a better question, I think, than whether they're a 4.2 or a 4.72. Right? How much would you care about that? And then I used to tell people at Netflix, I say, look, if you want to know what Reed thinks about your performance, he will absolutely tell you where you stand. You may want to be sitting when he does.
I hear what you're saying. In my career, though, I have viewed the performance review, rating systems, whatever you do, is a helpful tool with managers who are, unless you actually force them to choose between a couple things, they'll say everybody's great.
I agree.
And so, if you don't use a rating system, how do you fix that?
I don't have a problem with tools. I really don't. But data does not make decisions, humans do. In the end, it's a judgment call. Right? And so when we go back and redefine the role of management as this is Patty's rules of management, here's what you do. You build great teams that do amazing work on time with quality that serve the customer, period, end of story. Okay? So, if you rate everybody the same and you don't get anything done, then I don't really care what your rating system was. I care about your delivery and your results. And that's about building great teams that do that. So when we make that your job, right, to build those amazing teams and make hard choices, then if data helps you, then data should be absolutely involved, right? But it's hard to have data systems that are consistent and the same over broad swaths of people, because what it takes to be successful in one type of team or one type of job can be really different than another type.
Fair.
right? So that's why I start with what's the problem, what would things, so here's my methodology. I'll give it to you for free, right? 6 months from now, you have an amazing team. They're unbelievable. Everybody in the company's like, oh, whoa, you guys are knocking it out of the park. In 6 months, and I say 6 months because one of the things we don't do in startups is we don't put time wrappers on things. We do a lot of some days, okay? 6 months. What's occurring then that's not occurring now? Give me all your numerals, right? Everybody's rated 5.0. We have this much revenue growth. The product's moving this faster. We have this many more. Whatever it is, all those numerals, you already know those. 6 months out, don't give me a year, give me 6 months. And then make a movie of it, okay? Are there more meetings, or are there less meetings? Are people having knockdown, drag-out fights, coming to a conclusion and going? Or are people heads down, and are they working? Are they working what's different? Don't tell me what's more. Tell me what's different. What's occurring then that's not occurring now, okay? And when I tell CEOs this, I see them like walk through their companies in their heads. It's like they almost close their eyes. They're like, okay, I see it. Okay, now you see this, great. Okay, now drop down and tell me what would you need to know how to do in order to do that. So the cloud example that I gave you from Netflix, you would have had to seen streaming data at 150 times what we were currently doing. You would have scale. Scale and complexity are one of the usually two things that are new skills that you need in any team, right? When you go beyond working hard and now you have to work more in a more complex environment. Okay, so now you know what you need to know how to do. Then you drop down and say, what kind of skills and experience would it take for someone to know how to do that in order to accomplish that? And then, and only then, who do you got? Because if you start the team you have, then you'll do more, but you might not do amazing, right? So that gives you those deltas. That tells you who to hire, right? And that may or may not be, a list of acronyms on a page, but it might be a list of acronyms on a page where that person, your team is all very introvert. You need somebody who's going to go find out what the hell they're up to in marketing. Right? Who'll just go, I know somebody in marketing, I'll go ask them. Okay, oh, here's what they were thinking, right? So it gets to some of those softer skills that are the ones that are the deciding factor after all the data lines up.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your honesty and just insight and everything. We're going to be wrapping up here and handing over to JP shortly. So thank you for joining us. Great insight. And thank you for all the questions too, everybody.
Thank you, Patty.
So much for your questions.
Yeah, so much for that.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. Well, let's give it one more time to Patty McCord and Robert Homan of Glassdoor. Real pleasure. Thank you again for sharing that insight. And now a little bit of sad news. This wraps up the end of the Great Places to Work tour for today. But I want to thank all of you for being here in the audience today at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. I also want to thank the thousands of people watching via live stream. Hopefully you've learned how culture and employee sentiment plays a pivotal role in your recruiting strategies. And if you want to learn more about how Glassdoor can help you recruit and hire the best people, head on over to glassdoor.com/employers. And who knows, maybe we'll see you next year as the best places to work. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the awesome taco bar outside and enjoy some networking. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, fantastic.
Thank you.